Hello, everyone. Welcome to Learn English with Podcast. My name is Nikki.
And I'm Tony. Today we're talking about how to improve your English quickly. We have some great tips and special guests joining us later.
Yes, Tony. We are very excited to share our advice with you. Learning English can be fun and fast if you know the right way to do it. So, let's get started.
Absolutely, Nikki. So, my first tip is to practice speaking every day. Even if it's just for a few minutes, talk to yourself, talk to your friends, or even your pets. When you practice speaking, you get more comfortable with the language.
That's a great tip, Tony. When I was learning Spanish, I talked to myself a lot. It helped me feel more comfortable with the words. I would describe my day, or even talk about what I was cooking.
Yes, Nikki, and it's also important to listen to English as much as you can. Listen to music, watch movies, or even listen to this podcast. The more you hear English, the better you will understand it. It's like training your ear to catch different accents and speeds.
That's true, Tony. I love watching movies with subtitles. It helps me understand how words are pronounced and used in sentences. I remember watching Friends with English subtitles and repeating the dialogues. It was so much fun.
Oh yes, I do that too. And another tip is to read in English. Start with easy books or short stories. Reading helps you learn new words and see how sentences are made. For example, you can start with children's books, then move to young adult novels as you get better.
Exactly. When I was learning, I read children's books like Harry Potter. They are easy to understand and fun to read. Plus, you get to learn new vocabulary and context, which helps you remember it better.
Writing is very important too, Nikki. Keep a diary in English. Write about your day, your thoughts, or even your dreams. Writing helps you remember words and practice grammar. You could also try writing letters to pen pals or even emails to friends.
Yes, I remember my English teacher always said, "Practice makes perfect." The more you write, the better you get. I used to write a short story every week. It was challenging, but it really improved my writing skills.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are part of learning. Every mistake is a chance to learn something new. If you don't make mistakes, you're not pushing yourself hard enough.
That's a very good point, Tony. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. What's another tip you have for our listeners?
Well, another good tip is to use English in real situations. Go to a cafe and order in English or ask for directions. Real-life practice is very helpful. It's one thing to learn in a classroom, but using English in the real world makes it stick.
Yes, Tony. I remember when I went to London for the first time, I tried to speak English with everyone. It was scary but very good for my English. I even asked locals for the time and directions just to practice.
That's a brave thing to do, Nikki. And speaking of bravery, join an English class or a conversation group. It's a great way to meet people and practice together. These groups can also give you feedback on your speaking and help you improve faster.
Yes, Tony. I joined a conversation group when I was learning French. It was so much fun, and I made many friends. We would meet every week and talk about different topics. It really boosted my confidence.
And don't forget to have fun with English. Play games, sing songs, or even tell jokes. Learning should be enjoyable. If you enjoy the process, you're more likely to stick with it.
Yes, Tony. Do you have a favorite English joke?
Oh yes. Why did the Scarecrow win an award?
I don't know, Tony. Why?
Because he was outstanding in his field.
Haha, that's a good one, Tony. Jokes are a fun way to practice English too. They help you learn new words and expressions in a playful way.
Definitely, Nikki. So, to summarize, practice speaking every day, listen to English, read, write, use English in real situations, join a group, and have fun.
Yes, these are great tips, Tony. And we will hear more tips from our guests soon.
For now, let's continue with more tips.
Yes, Tony. One of my favorite tips is to use language apps. There are many apps like Duolingo, Babbel, and Memrise that make learning fun and interactive. You can practice vocabulary, grammar, and even speaking with these apps.
That's a great tip, Nikki. I use language apps too. They have short, engaging lessons that you can do anytime, anywhere. It's a great way to fit learning into your daily routine.
Exactly, Tony. Another tip is to immerse yourself in English. Change the language settings on your phone, computer, and social media to English. This way, you see and use English every day without even thinking about it.
Yes, immersion is key. When I was learning French, I changed all my devices to French. It was a bit confusing at first, but I learned so many new words and phrases.
That's a smart move, Tony. And speaking of immersion, try to think in English. This can be challenging, but it's very effective. When you see something, try to name it in English. When you plan your day, think about it in English.
That's a good one, Nikki. Thinking in English helps you become more fluent. It reduces the time you spend translating in your head. For example, instead of thinking, I need to go to the store in your native language and then translating it, just think directly in English.
Exactly, Tony. Another useful tip is to practice pronunciation. Use online tools or apps that focus on pronunciation. Record yourself speaking and listen to it. Compare it with native speakers and try to improve.
Yes, pronunciation is important. I used to record myself and play it back to hear my mistakes. It was very helpful. Also, watching videos on YouTube about pronunciation can be very useful.
That's a good idea, Tony. And don't forget about grammar. It's important to know the rules, but don't get too stressed about it. Practice and use grammar in context. For example, learn a grammar rule and then write sentences using that rule.
Yes, Nikki. Grammar can be tricky, but it's essential. Try to learn a little bit every day. And remember, it's okay to make mistakes. You will learn from them.
That's right, Tony. Another fun way to learn is through games. There are many language learning games online that can help you improve your vocabulary and grammar while having fun.
Yes, games are a fantastic way to learn. They make learning less boring and more interactive. I love playing word games like Scrabble and crossword puzzles. They help you think quickly and learn new words.
Absolutely, Tony. And speaking of interaction, finding a language partner is very helpful. You can practice speaking and listening with them. It's even better if they are native speakers.
That's a great point, Nikki. Language partners can give you real-time feedback and help you improve faster. You can find language partners on websites like Tandem or HelloTalk.
Yes, Tony. And finally, be patient and persistent. Learning a language takes time. Don't get discouraged if you don't see progress right away. Keep practicing and you will improve.
That's excellent advice, Nikki. Remember, everyone learns at their own pace. Celebrate your small victories and keep moving forward.
So, to summarize, use language apps. Immerse yourself in English. Think in English. Practice pronunciation. Learn grammar. Play games. Find a language partner and be patient.
These tips will definitely help you improve your English quickly. And now, we have a very special guest joining us. He is an English professor from a prestigious university. Please welcome Professor John Smith.
Hello, Professor Smith. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Nikki. Hello, Tony. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're thrilled to have you, Professor Smith. Can you tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
Sure, I've been teaching English for over 20 years at various universities. I specialize in language acquisition and helping students improve their English quickly and effectively.
That's wonderful, Professor Smith. Today, we're talking about tips to improve English quickly. Can you share some advice with our listeners?
Of course. One of the most effective ways to improve your English is to engage in active learning. This means not just passively listening or reading, but actively using the language. For example, after you learn new vocabulary, try to use those words in sentences right away.
That's a great tip. Can you give an example of how to use active learning with vocabulary?
Certainly. Let's say you learn the word enthusiastic. Instead of just memorizing it, you could write sentences like, I am enthusiastic about learning English. Or, my friend is very enthusiastic about playing soccer. This helps you remember the word and understand how to use it in context.
That makes a lot of sense. What about speaking?
Many of our listeners feel shy or nervous when speaking English. What can they do?
That's a common challenge. The key is to practice speaking as much as possible. One effective method is to find a language partner or join a speaking club. You can also practice by speaking to yourself or recording your voice. The more you speak, the more confident you will become.
Yes, practice is so important. Do you have any tips for improving listening skills?
Absolutely. To improve listening skills, try to listen to a variety of English accents and speeds. You can do this by watching movies, listening to podcasts, or even using language learning apps. It's also helpful to listen to something you enjoy, like music or news, because you'll be more engaged.
That's very helpful. How about reading? What are some good strategies for improving reading skills?
For reading, start with materials that match your level. If you're a beginner, try children's books or simple articles. Gradually move to more complex texts. Another good strategy is to read aloud. This not only improves your reading skills but also your pronunciation and fluency.
Speaking of pronunciation, do you have any specific exercises to help with that?
Yes, pronunciation can be tricky, but there are many exercises that can help. One effective method is shadowing, where you listen to a sentence and then repeat it as closely as possible to the speaker. Tongue twisters are also a fun way to practice difficult sounds.
I love tongue twisters. Do you have a favorite one?
Yes, here's a classic. She sells seashells by the seashore. It's a great exercise for practicing the says and she sounds.
That's a good one. Now, Professor Smith, you mentioned earlier about language immersion. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Of course. Language immersion means surrounding yourself with English as much as possible. This can be done by changing the language settings on your devices, watching TV shows in English, or even traveling to an English-speaking country. The goal is to make English a part of your daily life.
That's excellent advice. Before we wrap up, do you have any final tips for our listeners?
Yes, my final tip is to stay motivated and set clear goals. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. Celebrate your progress and don't get discouraged by setbacks. Remember why you are learning English and keep that motivation strong.
Thank you so much, Professor Smith. Your advice has been incredibly valuable. We are sure our listeners will benefit a lot from your tips.
Yes, thank you, Professor Smith. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Nikki and Tony. It was great being here. Good luck to all the listeners with your English learning journey.
All right, everyone. We just had a fantastic conversation with Professor Smith about improving your English. Now we have another special guest. He speaks several languages and will share his secrets to learning languages quickly. Please welcome our multilingual expert, Carlos Diaz.
Hello, Carlos. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, Nikki and Tony. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Carlos, can you tell our listeners a bit about yourself and how many languages you speak?
Sure, I'm originally from Spain, and I speak Spanish, English, French, Italian, and a bit of German. I've been learning languages for over 15 years and have developed some effective strategies that I'd love to share.
That's impressive, Carlos. Can you start by telling us your top tips for learning a new language quickly?
Of course, one of my favorite methods is to use language flashcards, but with a twist. Instead of just writing the word and its translation, write a sentence using the word. This way, you learn how to use the word in context, which helps with remembering it.
That's a great idea. Can you give us an example of how you use this method?
Sure. For instance, if you're learning the word happy, don't just write happy on one side and the translation on the other. Write a sentence like, I am happy because it's sunny. This helps you remember the word and see how it's used in a sentence.
That makes a lot of sense. What about using technology to learn languages?
Any unique tools you recommend?
Definitely. I recommend using virtual reality for language learning. There are VR apps that let you immerse yourself in different environments where you can practice speaking and listening. It's like being in another country without leaving your home.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Do you have any specific apps in mind?
Yes, apps like Monthly VR are fantastic for this. They create scenarios like ordering food at a restaurant or asking for directions, which helps you practice real-life situations in a fun and engaging way.
That's a fantastic tip. What about integrating language learning into daily routines?
Do you have any creative ideas?
Absolutely. One fun way is to label things around your house in the language you're learning. For example, put a label on your refrigerator that says fridge in English. Every time you see it, you'll remember the word. It's a simple yet effective way to learn vocabulary.
That's a clever idea. How about improving speaking skills? Any unconventional methods?
Yes, try speaking to virtual assistants like Siri or Alexa in the language you're learning. Ask them questions, set reminders, or even have simple conversations. It's a great way to practice speaking and get instant feedback.
That's brilliant, Carlos. What about learning through hobbies? Any tips there?
Definitely. If you have a hobby, try to incorporate your target language into it. For instance, if you love cooking, follow recipes in the language you're learning. If you're into gaming, play games with the language settings changed. This way, you're learning while doing something you enjoy.
That's a fantastic approach. How do you keep track of your progress?
Keeping a language journal is very helpful. Write down new words you've learned, phrases you found useful, and even short daily entries about your day. It helps you see your progress and reinforces what you've learned.
What a great idea. Do you have any fun methods for learning grammar?
Yes, grammar can be tricky, but making it fun helps. I like to create grammar comics, draw simple cartoons, or use online tools to create comic strips using grammar rules. It makes learning more engaging and helps you remember the rules better.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Before we wrap up, do you have any final tips for our listeners?
Yes, my final tip is to use music as a learning tool. Listen to songs in the language you're learning, read the lyrics, and try to sing along. Music makes learning enjoyable and helps with pronunciation and vocabulary.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Your tips are incredibly valuable, and we're sure our listeners will benefit a lot from them.
Yes, thank you, Carlos. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. It was great to be here. Good luck to everyone learning a new language.
All right, everyone. We've had some amazing tips from our previous guests, and now we have our final guest. He's an evaluator for an international company and has a lot of experience in assessing English proficiency. Please welcome David Lee.
Hello, David. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Nikki and Tony. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share some tips with your listeners.
We're excited too. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your work?
Sure. I work for a global company where I evaluate the English skills of potential employees. I've seen many different levels of proficiency and have learned a lot about what works best for improving English.
That's fantastic, David. Can you share some unique tips for our listeners to improve their English?
Of course. One tip I always give is to use English in your everyday decisions. For instance, when you're at a restaurant, try to decide what to order in English. Think about what you'll say to the waiter if you were speaking English. It's a great mental exercise.
That's a great idea. What other practical tips do you have?
Another tip is to write a daily diary in English. Even if it's just a few sentences about your day, it helps you practice writing and think in English. Over time, you'll notice your writing getting better and your vocabulary expanding.
That's a wonderful tip. How about improving listening skills? Any creative suggestions?
Yes, try listening to audiobooks while you're commuting or doing chores. Choose books that interest you and are at your language level. This way, you're combining learning with something you enjoy, and it helps improve your listening skills without it feeling like a chore.
That's a great suggestion. What about speaking practice? Any new ideas?
For speaking practice, I recommend joining online forums or discussion groups about topics you're passionate about. This could be anything from cooking to technology. Engaging in conversations about your interests will make you more eager to participate and practice speaking.
That's an excellent tip. What about using English in a work environment? Any advice for professionals?
Definitely. For professionals, I suggest participating in English-speaking webinars or workshops related to your field. It not only helps with language skills, but also with industry-specific vocabulary. Plus, you get to network with other professionals.
That's very practical advice. How can people make use of their leisure time to improve English?
Try to incorporate English into your hobbies. If you like watching sports, Watch them with English commentary. If you enjoy reading, try English magazines or blogs about your interests. The key is to integrate English into the activities you love.
Great advice. How about improving pronunciation?
For pronunciation, one effective method is to mimic native speakers. Find a short video or speech, listen to it, and try to imitate the speaker as closely as possible. Pay attention to their intonation, stress, and rhythm. This can greatly improve your pronunciation.
That sounds very useful. Any final tips you'd like to share?
Yes, one last tip is to stay curious and always ask questions. If you come across a word or phrase you don't understand, look it up and learn how to use it. Curiosity drives learning and helps you expand your language skills continuously.
Thank you so much, David. Your tips are incredibly helpful, and we're sure our listeners will find them very useful.
Yes, thank you, David. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Nikki and Tony. It was great to be here. Good luck to everyone on their English learning journey.
All right, everyone. We've had an amazing show today with lots of fantastic tips on improving your English quickly. Now, let's review some of the key advice and introduce 5 new words we've learned during our discussions.
That's right, Tony. Let's start with the tips. First, Professor Smith emphasized the importance of active learning. Use new vocabulary in sentences right away and practice speaking as much as possible.
Yes. And he also talked about language immersion. Surround yourself with English through movies, podcasts, and daily interactions.
Then, Carlos Diaz shared some unique strategies like using language flashcards with full sentences, exploring virtual reality apps, and labeling items around the house in your target language. He also suggested using virtual assistants like Siri or Alexa to practice speaking.
Right. He also mentioned incorporating hobbies into language learning, like cooking from recipes in the target language or playing video games with language settings changed. Carlos also suggested keeping a language journal and using music as a learning tool.
And finally, David Lee gave us practical tips like making decisions in English, writing a daily diary, and joining online discussion groups about topics you're passionate about. He also recommended listening to audiobooks and mimicking native speakers to improve pronunciation.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about 5 new words we've learned today. The first word is immerse.
Immerse means to involve oneself deeply in a particular activity or interest. For example, I immerse myself in English by watching movies and listening to podcasts.
The second word is virtual.
Virtual refers to something that is simulated or created by computer technology. For example, Carlos uses virtual reality apps to practice speaking English.
The third word is mimic.
Mimic means to imitate or copy someone's actions or speech. For example, to improve pronunciation, try to mimic native speakers.
The fourth word is curious.
Curious describes someone who is eager to learn or know something. For example, being curious and asking questions helps you learn new words.
And the fifth word is proficiency.
Proficiency means a high degree of skill or expertise in something. For example, David evaluates the English proficiency of potential employees.
Let's repeat these words: immerse, virtual, mimic, curious, and proficiency.
And now, let's use them in sentences again to reinforce their meanings.
Great idea! To improve my English proficiency, I immerse myself in virtual environments and mimic native speakers.
Excellent. Staying curious and asking questions about new words helps you achieve language proficiency.
Perfect. We hope these words and tips help you on your journey to improving your English quickly.
Yes, remember to stay motivated, be consistent, and have fun with your learning. Every little bit helps, and soon you'll see great progress.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the podcast and found it helpful.
Until next time, keep practicing and stay curious.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.